Hello everyone. In this tutorial video, I'm going to explain arbitrary arguments or argument in Python. But before that, please support the channel by clicking on the subscribe button and hit also the notification bell so that you will be notified with all the new videos that I'm going to upload in this channel. And so what is arbitrary argument, or what are arbitrary arguments? Arbitrary arguments are any number of arguments that you can place in a function. Whenever you call a function, you can specify any number of arguments. It could be 2, it could be 3, it could be 4, which means if you are not sure on the number of arguments that you will place, or the number of arguments changes, it varies, then you can use an arbitrary arguments. Typically, when you call a function, let's say you have a function with 3 arguments. When you define that function, it will have also 3 parameters. That is the traditional way of declaring a function. If you have, or if you will pass 2 arguments, so you will have also to define a function with 2 parameters. Okay, but not with arbitrary arguments. Like I said, arbitrary arguments will allow the programmer to specify any number of arguments. Okay, so something like this. Now, to give you an example of an arbitrary argument in Python, so it will be something like this. So for instance, we have here the main program. So let's call a function, let's call the function as numbers. Okay, so we have a function, it's called numbers. And so the arguments here are 10, 30, 40, and 15. So right now I have 4 arguments. Okay, on the next time I will call the function, I may have only 2. All right, so for instance, I may have 2. The next time I may have 3. The next time I may have 4 again. Let's change like this. Okay, so it varies every time I call this function numbers. Okay, sometimes I have 2 arguments, sometimes I have 3 arguments, sometimes I have 4 arguments or 5. It's not fixed. So if this is the case, then you have to use an arbitrary arguments, or you have to define a function that will have arbitrary arguments. All right, so we have this function numbers 10, 30, 40, and 15 as the argument. So since we are not sure on the number of arguments, therefore, this is an arbitrary argument. So therefore, when you design or when you define the function, it will be something like this. You will only have 1 parameter, but that parameter should start with asterisk. Okay, so here you have 4, but here you only have 1 parameter. So asterisk means it signifies arbitrary arguments, or any number of arguments can be possible here. Okay, so you just have to specify here 1 parameter. Okay, this becomes now a tuple. Okay, think of a tuple as a list. Okay, so a tuple is an ordered sequence of items. So it is an ordered sequence of items. These are the sequence of items. In this case, these are numbers. So that is a tuple. So think of a tuple as something like that. Okay, so num now, the variable num will become a tuple. Okay, an ordered sequence of items. It is a group. Okay, it is a group of sequence of items. that is what will happen here. So for instance, in our function, we will just print all these numbers. All the numbers we pass as arguments, we will just print those numbers inside this function. So since I'm going to get each of the number, so I'm just going to use the for. Let's say I'm going to use the x as our variable in num. Okay, so I am using the num. Okay, I use a variable num here as our parameter, so therefore I will get the values of the num one by one. Okay, so the initial loop, that the value of x is 10. Alright, so and then let's print the 10. There you go. We are printing now the value 10. Okay, on the next loop, it will come back again in 6. So the value of x this time is 30. Because again, a tuple is an ordered sequence of items. Num becomes a tuple. So that's how we access each data. That's how we get each of these arguments. Okay, so if I'm going to run this now, I should be having like this. So 10, 30, 40, and 15, as you can see here. Okay, so it's going to be like this. So this is how we get the numbers from a tuple. And this is how we define the function with an arbitrary arguments. Just always put in your mind that arbitrary arguments, you have any number of arguments. In the definition of the function, you will only have one parameter. Okay? I'm going to call again the numbers function. So numbers, this time I will have only 2 arguments. No? So this time I have numbers 130. So I'm going to call again numbers function. Okay, so second call to the function, line number 11. So let us run again the program. So twice we call the function numbers. So as you can see, so we printed 10, 30, 40, and 15. Then we call it again, this time 130. So as you can see, it is running perfectly. This is what we call a function with arbitrary arguments. When we say arbitrary arguments, any number of arguments is possible. You can specify, you can place any number of arguments. Okay, so we can also have something like this. I'm going to call it again, numbers. Let's say 25. Okay, 25. Can I have another number here? Let's say 90. This time 3. Is it possible? Yes, it is possible. So I'm going to run it again. And that is what we get now. Okay, so I'm going to adjust this here. So as you can see, we have 10, 30, 40, 15. That's the first call to the numbers. And then 130, that's the second call to the numbers. And then 25 and 90, that's the third call to the function numbers. Okay, so as simple as this. Let's have another example. For instance, well, I'm going to remove this first so that we can have another example, right? So let's say def country. Okay, I'm going to create a function country. So here, country. Okay, so it's something like this. So let's say I'm going to create a function wherein the arguments are countries. For instance, Oman. For instance, United States of America. And then let's say United Kingdom. And so we have three arguments here for this function country: Oman, USA, and United Kingdom. Okay, but I want to specify the arguments to be arbitrary arguments. And so therefore, in the definition of the country now, right, it could be something like this, asterisk, let's call it country. Okay, so as you can see, so the parameter variable is country. There is no problem with your definition function here. It is also the same country. There is no problem with this because the name of the function is country and the name of the parameter, this is different, is also country. And take note, we have asterisk here. This signifies arbitrary arguments. Python will know now that you are using arbitrary arguments, which means it can be any number of arguments here. As you can see, we have 3. The next time you will call the function country, maybe you will have only 2 countries, or 4, or 5. Okay? So again, just put in your mind, arbitrary arguments allow you or will allow you to specify any number of arguments. Okay? So for instance, in this function, I'm just going to print the length of each country, meaning to say how many characters are there for each country. Let's say Oman is 4, USA is 3, United Kingdom is how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, something like 13. Okay, so I'm just going to print the length, the number of characters for each country. Okay, so still the same. I'm going to say X in country. Okay, so I'm going to print now. This time I'm going to use the length function because the length function will print the length of this X. Okay, so initially the value of X is Oman, so it will print 4. The next time it will come back here in 10, it will come back here in 10 because this is a loop statement. So the value of X is USA. So I'm saying here, print len X. X is USA, so it will print 3. Okay, and so on with the United Kingdom. So if we will run this, there you go. So we have 4, we have 3, we have 14 actually. Okay, so if we will count the numbers of the letters in the United Kingdom, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, including the space, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Okay, so it's going to be like this. Okay, so if we call again the country, let's say this time it's a different country. Let's say Turkey. Oops, Turkey. Another one will be China. Okay, so 2 only. Is this possible? So I'm going to run. So there you go. So the first call, line 14, we have 4, 3, and 14. On the second call, we have 6 and 5. Is it 6? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for Turkey. So 6 letters. And for the China, we have 5 letters. So this is an example of arbitrary argument. Again, no? So you can specify any number of arguments. Okay? It's not fixed. So sometimes the arguments are 3, sometimes the arguments are 2, sometimes the arguments is 1. Okay? Now, as you can see in our function, they don't return any value, no? Is that possible also using arbitrary arguments? Yes, it's possible. Okay, so I'm going to create another function here. Let's call the function as highest number. So high, let's call it high number. Okay, well, let's call it highest number. Okay, so I'm going to specify numbers here, and then it will return to me the highest number. Okay, so something like this. So I have how many arguments? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. The function that we will create is a function that will return the highest number based on the arguments you will pass. All right, here, based on the arguments. Okay, so it will get the highest number from these arguments. So right now we have 6 arguments. So it will return the highest number. Okay, so it will return only one value, right? So let's see. So I'm going to say highest, or I mean def highest number. Okay, so again, since this is an arbitrary argument, which means we can call again highest number with a different number of arguments. For instance, only 2 arguments. Therefore, this is what we call arbitrary argument. So let's call this as num. Okay, so our variable is num. Again, you can specify your variable here. Okay, for this example, I'm just going to use the variable num. Again, there should be asterisk. Asterisk means arbitrary arguments. It will accept arbitrary arguments. So next is highest number is equal to max num. I can just specify like this because the num is a set of items, no? Set of ordered sequence of items. Okay, so the num will become a tuple, like I said. It is an ordered sequence of items. It's a group of numbers. So therefore, from the group of numbers, which is num, I'm just going to get the maximum number, max. Okay, so meaning the highest number. And then we will just return highest number. Okay, so when it return here in line 18, since we are returning one value, so therefore, there should be a variable here. All right, so let's call it here as the highest number. Let's call it h. Okay, so again, because it is returning one value, therefore, there should be one waiting variable here because you are returning one value. Okay, and so therefore, we can now print highest number. Let's see. Let's see if it is correct. So I'm going to run now. And there you go. The highest number is 1000 here. All right. So that's how it is. So we have a function with arbitrary arguments that can also return a value. All right. Again, you are not limited to one value that you can return. You can return more than one also. 3, 4, or 5 are return values. It depends on the problem. It's possible. All right. So let's call again. Let's have another one. Let's call again this. Okay. Highest number. So this time, I'm just going to use 3 arguments. So let's just change the values. Okay. So let's say like this. And so when we run now, we have the 1400. So this is an example of a function with arbitrary arguments, and that function with arbitrary arguments can also return a value. Our first 2 examples here, it doesn't return a value. All right. So these are examples of arbitrary arguments. Just put in your mind, the idea here is that arbitrary arguments, okay, in a function are arguments that you can, any number of arguments that you can specify in a function. Okay, so, and then put also in your mind that when you define the function, it will only have one parameter. Okay, so as you can see here, we only have one parameter. Okay, so again, if the problem is that you're not sure of the number of arguments, the number of arguments are not fixed. Sometimes they are 2, sometimes they are 3, sometimes they are 4. Immediately, the answer there is function with arbitrary arguments, because the arguments are not fixed. They change, all right? So it depends on the given problem. Okay? So I hope you have learned something about these arbitrary arguments. I hope you understand the arbitrary arguments. If you have question about these arbitrary arguments, you can put your question in the comment section below of this video, and then I will be glad to respond or reply to your question or comment. Okay? Thank you very much for watching this video, and see you on my next video.